I wasn't comfortable in my own body, and it made no sense to me logically. I feel like I'm an intelligent woman. I'm a doer. I own my own businesses. I show up. I've always shown up in the way that I've wanted to show up in the world. And here I was, this menopausal woman in a body that I didn't like, and it wasn't doing what I wanted it to do. And I just really felt stuck and was ruminating a lot and not going anywhere fast. Once we started getting my macros really in line with what my body needed, the menopausal symptoms went away.
Today, we have not just a coach, we have our incredible director of coaching, Robyn, who is a past Ignite member. So we thought it would be fun. Robyn has helped, holy cow, I don't even know if we could put a number on how many women she's helped at this point, because I like to call her the coach of coaches, right? She's the one guiding our team of, what are we up to, 35, 40 coaches? That's bananas. Mindstrong was a one-woman show for so many years. It blows my mind. So Robyn is leading all of our coaches. So by default, she's seeing what every single member that goes through Ignite is doing and bouncing ideas off of her. And she's just the best of the best. So, with that said, today Robyn and I are going to do a little Q&A. I'm just going to ask her some questions about her own Ignite journey back in the day and just what she's seen in all these women that she's helped. I want to make sure to save time for a decent Q&A at the end with you guys. I think when you hear how Robyn's brain works, you're going to want to pick her brain. Robyn is this beautiful mix of data brained and heart centeredness. Is that a word? Heart centeredness. And just such an incredible educator. So I think when you hear how she explains, we're all going to want to ask her a million questions. So Robyn, welcome, welcome. Robyn has gone through the ranks. As you heard me mention, she started as an Ignite member. She went on to become a coach. She went on to become a head coach. And then she went on to now become our director of coaching. Again, our coach of coaches. So, Robyn, let's take it back a long, long time ago now to when you first became an Ignite member. Can you tell us a little bit about just what was going on? Like what was your personal journey story that brought you to the Mind Strong world?
Sure. No, and it's so interesting to me because my journey in Ignite actually brings me full circle to why I am sitting here where I am today, right? It was such a transformational thing for me. And I know that word transformation gets thrown out or thrown around a lot in a really light way. And it was not light for me in any way, shape, or form. It was really interesting. And I think a lot of us as women come to Ignite carrying some baggage, baggage that we have just picked up along the way, whether we intended to or not. And really, my desperation came. I think it was a 11 p.m. kind of thing at night where I saw you on the internet and you spoke to my soul. Right. I am a math and science gal. My background is in field research and education. And, there, I think that um, when the person is ready for the message, the teacher appears, right? And I was ready for the message that you had, and it just hit me at just that moment. And it was oh my heck, what am I doing? Why am I pressing this button right now? And it was one of those kind of deer in the headlight moments. I sent in my credit card and afterwards had the, oh crap, what did I just do? Right. And absolutely the best money I have ever spent in my life because where I was at the moment, if you were to ask me just a word, is it was stuck. I was just stuck. I was sitting on a fence and spinning my rumination wheels 100 million miles and not going anywhere. And that was such an odd place for me to be. I know you and I had so many discussions. I was one of those blessed women that got to be instructed one-on-one with Rachel back in the day. And you heard that where I was is I was just in this place where I wasn't comfortable in my own body. And it made no sense to me logically. I feel like I'm an intelligent woman. I'm a doer. I own my own businesses. I show up. I've always shown up in the way that I've wanted to show up in the world. And here I was, this menopausal woman in a body that I didn't like, and it wasn't doing what I wanted it to do. And I just really felt stuck and was ruminating a lot and not going anywhere fast.
Mm.
So for me, mine was just kind of a history. I am a big boned woman, and that was a belief that had been given to me by my well-intentioned mother when I couldn't get as thin as every other girl. It's okay, honey, you're big boned. And she's not wrong. I mean, you can barely put your fingers around my wrists. I have very, very large bone structure. I was wearing a size 11 shoe in middle school. I am a larger woman in just my bone structure. And with that belief came a meaning I attached to it. My mother didn't intend the meaning that came with it, but the meaning I attached to it came that I was an outsider. I wasn't ever going to be quite that image of petite or pretty or whatever it was that I associated with what beauty looked like. Um, the nice thing about us big boned women is we also put on muscle quick, and I was an athlete, and I'm an outdoor adventurer, and all of this big bonedness worked really well for me through my 20s and 30s and carried me through all of the different things I love to do. I love to rock climb and whitewater kayak, and I'm an adventurer. I love to adventure outdoors, and that worked well. But when I got to menopause, it was just like I kind of lost my identity a little bit. And that's where I found Rachel. And my work, I had found macros on my own prior to Rachel. So I had done a lot of work there. I wish I could have gone back and done it with Rachel. It would have saved me a whole lot of time and energy because I did it all wrong. But I was eating like 1,200 calories. It was about 53 years old is where I really ran into the wall, right? I'd put on the same 10 pounds and lose it every year. And honestly, if I'm being truly honest, it's probably the same 10 to 20 pounds every year for probably 10 years. It was kind of the similar cycle. January would come and I had eaten whatever the heck I wanted to all winter long. I would figure out that I was going to be getting into a swimsuit in a couple of months and be out swimming. And so I would start the diet. I would diet, I'd exercise, I'd lose all the weight. By June, then I'd go back to eating whatever the heck I wanted, just kind of doing my thing, gain all the weight back. January would be on the same yo-yo. So I just kind of did this thing. Well, that worked fine. When I could eat 1,200 calories and exercise 6 to 7 days a week for an hour a day, it all worked. And then menopause hit, and I was doing all those things. And all of a sudden, I had this stomach. And I swear it was like an inner tube that showed up around my middle overnight. I don't know how it happened. But beyond that, it was the hot flashes. I was having between 8 to 10 hot flashes a day. And I'm talking like my skin melting off my face. Those women who are enduring that, you can kind of nod with me. It was overwhelming. And one of the things that just really blew my mind was as we started working with my macros and getting them optimized and aligned. I was a child of the 90s that, fell into the low fat diet was what you did to lose weight. And my fat was so low that when we actually optimized my fat and got me up into, an optimal level, my hot flashes disappeared 100%. Like I did not, like within a week, I had no more hot flashes within getting my macros up, my fat. And it just kind of blew my mind. And again, I'm a data brain. And so then I started, Rachel, probably, if I don't know, you can probably remember, I used to come to my meetings and I'd have these whole pages of
Oh,
data
I
that I was like,
remember.
I was like looking at every metric possible because I loved looking at the relationships. I was like, and this is when the hot flashes stopped, and this is where the weight started falling off my body, and so I guess where I came to you, Rachel, when we look back at Ignite was I was stuck. I was ruminating. I knew that I think there was some shame there because I felt like I was an intelligent woman that there was a whole lot of should know how to understand my body by the time I was at the age I was, and why couldn't I figure it out? And so that's where I came to you.
What a trip down memory lane. I vividly remember those 10 to 20 pounds. I remember you telling me that story because being a data brain, you had like tracked your years and you're like, this is where I lost it and this is where I regained it. And it was not fun is not the right word, but it was interesting to be able to see like, oh, there some people say I'm in this pattern, but we could see the data of like, yeah, this is a pattern you've been living on for years.
Yeah.
Amazing. So you talked a bit about hot flashes were a huge one, right? Can you talk more about some of the things that shifted as you went on your own journey into learning how to do macros correctly and the mindset work? Because I know we did a lot of mindset
Sure.
work.
Yeah. So the macros specifically, and I think those are two different journeys,
Yeah.
right? I think I- we kind of laugh as coaches and say, yes, you come here for losing weight. And then when we get here, we all find that there's a whole lot more, right? There's a whole other layer of what we're coming for. The macros, in my mind, is really the biology of what we're doing, and the mindset is really the sustainability, right? The biology part of it helps get the weight off and helps us optimize our health, but it's that mindset work that really gives us the sustainability over years. And that's really what I had never learned how to do. I had never learned how to maintain body weight, right? I knew how to lose it, at least before menopause, I did. But I didn't know how to maintain it. And I think that is one of, well, I can talk about this later, but sustainability is absolutely what we need, right? And when I could finally get a place where I could recognize, there's just so much chatter and there's so many research papers out there that will tell you one way to do things and then the other one, is, negating it. And I was so busy ruminating that there was something out there that was optimal that I wasn't doing, that instead of just acting, I was just ruminating. I was just reading and researching. And I think that's what I told you the most. I was like, I am exhausted. And what you did, I think where the shift was really when you and I did our work together, was the mirror that you held up to let me see that what I was living was a really perfectionistic lifestyle that had served me really well. It served me as a businesswoman. It served me as a researcher. It served me even as a mom. It served me in lots of ways, but it wasn't serving me in my health in any way, shape, or form, because what I was looking for was a perfect way to do something. And my shift was all of a sudden I recognized there is no perfect. And so no wonder I was exhausted because I was chasing after something that couldn't happen. And so I was spending so much time and energy and capacity looking for the perfect way to do something that I wasn't doing what was right in front of my eyes. So as you help me just kind of get a grasp on optimizing those macros, for me, fat was huge. And once we got my fat up, not only did my hot flashes go away, as well as my brain fog. Brain fog was something that I had never experienced before. And I'm very much that data brain, and so my intellect was something that I've always leaned into. And oh my gosh, I was thinking I'm too young to be forgetting things and being fuzzy brain. What's going on here? So yeah, it was just so interesting to me to be able to take that correlation of once we started getting my macros really in line with what my body needed, the menopausal symptoms went away. But then it was really the work we did on mindset shifting. And you really helped me recognize. You guys, I will tell you, when you hear Rachel talk about her Jason method, if you've listened to the podcast, it's basically do the bare minimum to get the ball rolling, to create some momentum. And Rachel will probably tell you my gut reaction was no, I am not doing this. That's not who I am. I am not somebody that tiptoes into something. I either do it or I don't do it. And she told me, well, a couple of things. One, you guys, she told me I had to send an email with a spelling error. I don't do that.
That was an actual
I was
assignment.
just like, no, I'm not doing that. Um, so to try to show up imperfectly was really a struggle for me. And what I love is, as she kept showing me what I thought was serving me wasn't serving me at all. In fact, it was keeping me back and it was keeping me in a fear-based place where I wasn't really willing to step into change and growth And what was really interesting to me is that's where I found my resistance was is one of my values, one of my highest values in life is growth. And
Mm,
here I was keeping myself from growing because I was trying to do things in a perfect way. So that I think for me was really the change was when you helped me step back and say, no, we're going to do the bare minimum. We're going to start simple and we're going to build on that and build momentum first. And then we can move on to increasing. And
yeah.
man, that was tough.
That's a scary one. Letting go of perfectionism. I love your comparison you just used of perfectionism to growth because you cannot have both. You can have it for a minute moment there, but perfectionism says that if I don't know for sure that I can do this perfectly, I'm not going to do it because if I don't do it perfectly, who am I, right? It's a self-identity thing. So our limit, our ceiling only stays to what we know we can accomplish. If you want to bust outside your comfort zone, your growth, whatever you want to call it, if you want to truly grow, it it is a must. It is a capital M must that you have to get comfortable being messy, showing up imperfectly, living in the gray. And both of it's an oxymoron, right? Yeah, perfectionism and living in the gray and the mess can't exist at the same time. That's such a beautiful juxtaposition to put those things next to each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I think the interesting thing there is I had always given grace to everybody else. And
Hmm.
the other thing that you helped me see was the person I wasn't giving grace to was myself. And, being able to just really start to recognize that here I was giving so much to so many other people and not willing to really put the oxygen mask on myself and allow myself some grace to learn and to grow and to develop in the way that I needed to. That was really empowering. And that actually, honestly, was the shift that moved me to be where I am today. Because that shift, in and of itself, allowed me to just really recognize that these habits, these routines I had developed for myself, these beliefs that I was just, all they are thoughts that I was believing over and over again, that really. I just needed what I wanted to do. It wasn't a need. It started off she had me do this activity. You guys will hear this from your coaches of, red flagging the shoulds and the musts and the needs. And I have always been an optimist. I've never really thought of myself as a negative person, and I'm not with other people. And when she had me do this, and your coaches, you can ask them to do it with you, it was powerful. I remember coming back to you the next week and being like, Mercy,
Mercy. Yep.
enough, enough. I felt so exhausted because all of a sudden I was kind of shining that light of awareness on how I was talking to myself. And I was talking to myself in a way that I would never, ever talk to anybody else. And so really being able to dig into that and figure out why. Why was I holding myself to a level that I would never have held anybody else to? And it wasn't serving me. I thought it was, but it wasn't. And recognizing that when I started, actually, Rachel has an activity that we do, talking to ourselves like a kindergartner. When we start actually looking at ourselves as that kindergarten version of ourselves, or you can reflect it onto, a child that you really adore. Would you ever speak to that person in the way that you're talking to yourself? And when I really embodied that and started recognizing that, it changed everything. It shifted my entire perspective of who I am and how I was treating myself. And when I up leveled that, it then freed up capacity to want to share this with everybody, right? Because it changed my world. It really did. It changed everything about how I saw my day, how I saw my interactions with my loved ones, how I was interacting in my career. It really transformed everything, to be honest.
Yeah, holy cow. And man, I love this trip down memory lane because one of the things that you do so beautifully now is catch other people on their shoulds and their musts, right? There's so many times now where like we'll be talking about a call you had, or I'll see it in action and you'll be like, must you? Like, should you? Right? And it's just reflecting that back, like, what's going to happen if you don't track your food? It's that power of choice. And
Yeah.
I take it for granted now because you are just the queen at red flagging other people's shoulds and musts. So it's so funny to think back on all that work that we did around
Well, they say your mess is your message, and I think that's so
it.
honest, right? I think when we experience things for ourselves, we have the opportunity to grow into it, and we now have empathy for it, and we recognize it. Like I can recognize from a mile away now when a woman is speaking to themselves in a way that's harsh because I've lived it, and I recognize those signs, right?
Yep. Your mess is your message. That's a new one for me. I always heard the thing you struggle with the most becomes the thing you're most passionate about teaching, but yours is that's punchier. I like that. All right, so let's transition a little bit. So you stepped into your power, did the work, right? And I want to emphasize that because yes, I was Robin's coach and introduced these ideas, but man, like you can probably already tell 20 minutes of talking to Robin, she she does the work. And then you went from being coach, head coach, director of coaching. Can you speak to some of the I want to ask this as two questions. You can choose to separate them or answer them together. You've seen thousands of women's macro plans, journeys, all the above at this point. So my two-part question is, what are some of the things you see time and again for the women who see the most success, whether that's logistical mindset? I'm going to guess the answer is both. And what are some of the biggest, I say guess, what are some of the biggest hindrances that you see? So the women who really excel, what are the common themes? And the people who tend to struggle and or go slower, what are the some common themes that you see?
Sure. So what's really interesting about that question is I think we can probably take what I'm going to say, and you'll see on one side of the stick is the success, and on the other side is the obstacle. One of the things that I like to talk about all the time is when we pick up a stick, we pick up both sides of it, right? And so if I am choosing something and I pick it up, the result or the outcome is on the other side of that stick. And I think that's the thing that I see the most as bringing success is when we make empowered choices. And I think one of the things for women that we see the most success with is when you can come in and really kind of empty the proverbial cup. Just kind of dump out what you think you already know about nutrition and about movement and about mindset, and really lean in with your coach and let your coach guide and direct you based on the feedback that they're getting from your body. So I think that's one part of it is really being willing to lean in and have kind of an open mind to accept that there may be a different way than what you have already believed or perceived to do things. I would have never in a million years have believed that raising my calories from 1,200 calories was what was needed to lose weight. That seemed so counterintuitive. Ladies, I now eat 2,300 calories to maintain my weight. Okay. If I eat lower than that, I actually start to lose weight. This is coming from a woman who could not lose her 20 pounds at 1,200 calories, working out 6 days a week at about an hour and a half in the gym. I could not lose it no matter what I did. So I think sometimes when we come in with these pre perceived kind of thoughts of how this journey is going to go, we get ourselves in trouble. And I think with that comes letting go of the outcome. And that's what I would say is the number one thing. If we can come in and let go of our, now this is going to sound bad because I don't want it to be taken out of context. I want to say let go of your expectations. And that doesn't mean that we don't expect that we're going to get results or that we're going to have a desired outcome, but it's really letting go of the expectation of how the journey will look. And I think that's really important, right? If we can come in and we can actually let go of what that outcome will look like, and we just put the work in and we move one step at a time and then take the feedback from our body and follow that feedback. That's where I think the magic happens. Um, so I think that would be the first thing. Um, Gosh, I could talk all day on this, Rachel. So I don't know how much in depth you want me to go. I will say that pre-logging is absolutely one of those skills that if you are struggling with tracking your macronutrients, pre-logging or pre-planning is one of the skills that I see bring the most success to most women. It kind of goes with the saying, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. And I think that is really honestly true. If we don't give ourselves some time and capacity to create space for change, we're not going to be able to see that momentum occur. And so, pre-planning macronutrients is one skill. If we're looking at like a hard skill, we're going to be tracking this food anyways because we want the feedback. So if we can learn to track it before we've actually eaten it, it's so much easier to make a shift or a change before I have stuffed that food in my mouth than after. After, now I'm like looking at the end of the day and I'm like, oh my gosh, I have how many fats left and no carbs and no proteins. Who wants to be, big spooning oil? Nobody, right? And so if I can pre-plan beforehand some of those things, and we can go a little more into the weeds with questions in that there, but I do think that there are some skills there. I was just trying to think. I think the other thing is focusing on identity. The more that we can focus on identity, and you mentioned this already, Rachel, I think a lot of us come in with looking at weight loss or habit change backwards. I think we come in looking at, okay, when I have this thing that I want so desperately, then I will do the things that I'm saying I'm going to do, and then I will be that person that I want to be. And really, transformation happens so much more quickly when we reverse that. When we can look at what is it that I absolutely want, and then I start being that person, right? So I look at, I want to be a woman that has an active, energetic lifestyle and has a range of motion. Well, what is it that I need to be in order to have that? And starting to really focus on the identity first. For me, you know, I wanted to feel strong and capable in my body. And so I had a little mantra I would say every morning. And I know it sounds so hokey in many ways, and it rewired my brain. I would wake up every morning and say, I am a strong, capable woman who is creating health in my body today by, and whatever my focus for the week was, came after. And it was in that creating that the happiness came. So instead of saying, I will be happy when I have, the weight loss or the health or whatever it is, it's really turning it around. It's, I can choose to be happy and content right this minute in my body, even though I don't love everything about it. I can be grateful for what it does, right? And that was really my shift was I wasn't comfortable in my skin yet, but I could really focus on gratitude. I have this body that can move and it's strong and it can hold, it can hold children and it can go out and hike and hear birds or whatever, we can go wherever we want with that. But I can be that person right now that's happy and have space for being able to move forward. And so then what I would say, okay, if I am a woman that is confident and strong and happy in my skin, what does that woman have? And what does that woman do? And so then it's working backwards. Okay, well, if that woman has mobility, well, then I've got to be moving my body. I've got to be moving my body. And then Rachel, you taught me beautifully to take away the rules. Here's an example of it, you guys. I'm a little under the weather today. I'm not feeling completely up and as chipper as I normally would be. And Wednesdays are my day. I typically do a hit workout. I typically do a 20-minute hit workout. And this morning I wasn't feeling it. I just don't quite have the energy that I normally do. I'm kind of fighting off a bug, I think. And so I pulled out my Rachel's workouts and I did a 20-minute weight workout and it was perfect, right? It wasn't what I had planned. And we can shift if we know what the outcome is that we want and we know we're kind of working to that. I don't have to stay with the rule of, okay, but every Wednesday I do a hit workout. Now it's, I am a woman who moves my body. What is going to work today? Yes, I have a plan in place of what I want that to kind of look like, and I'm able to shift in the moment to work with what my lifestyle says is needed for today.
I'm going to interrupt this episode real quickly to ask a 30-second favor. If you are loving the podcast, if you can tap that 5-star review button above, maybe even leave a few nice words, it is the biggest help to getting the podcast out there. As the time I'm recording this, we don't advertise the podcast, so we rely on our old friend, the algorithm, to help get it in the hands of other women. Leaving a review is the absolute number one way to help us do that. Thank you in advance. Thank you. Thank you. Now let's get back to the episode.
So
I love
we
that.
can
Well, I think
keep
that came
going.
up.
I'll stop talking. I'm on a monologue
Oh,
here.
these are so good. I think that that actually came up in office hours this month. We were talking about how as humans we love arbitrary rules, right? Like, well, I work out in the mornings, but I have a meeting Wednesday morning, so I can't work out Wednesday. It's like, well, could you work out in the evening? Right? But it's like we've made up these rules and we say come hell or high water, that's the rule. And if we zoom out a little bit, it's like, but why? Because we just
Yeah,
slapped an arbitrary rule on it and now we guide our life around it.
yeah,
And it's a little thing that makes a massive difference.
yeah. I have one more thing that I thought of
Yeah,
as you
keep
were
them coming.
talking real
This is
quick.
gold.
I questions. You were asking what makes us
Hmm.
successful? Empowering questions. And I believe in this so much. And you'll see if I ever work with you one-on-one for any reason, you'll see that I will pull this out because I think it is so transformative in the way that we approach things. Um, I always say I either want an exclamation point or a question mark at the end of it. I don't like just telling my brain sentences because when I put it in a declarative, when I just state it, my brain has nothing to do, right? If I just say, I can't track my macros today, well, it's already decided. There's nothing for my brain to go and figure out, right? Whereas if I ask myself, where could I find the time to track my macros today? Well, now my brain starts looking for, okay, I have 10 minutes of a pocket of time here. We've got 15 minutes here. I bet we could do it a half hour here. Your brain goes into problem solving mode. And I think that's incredibly powerful anytime we are looking at our journey, um, asking ourselves really empowering questions. How could this happen? Where could this happen? When could this? And instead, what that does, again, it gets our brain looking for solutions instead of just saying, oh, you know what, it can't happen today. I thought of that when you were talking about the exercise because I think that's so true. I was talking with a woman the other day, and she had just said, I cannot work out. There's just no way that I can work out. And as you break down those barriers and start asking yourself the questions and give your brain time to look for it, she came up with beautiful plan of exactly what her plans were. And I find that over and over again, when we give our brain an opportunity to seek for solutions, it typically will come up with them. We just have to ask the right questions.
I love that. And that one's such a, I mean, I'd love to say hashtag bigger life statement, right? That is such a bigger life statement. We talk about this a lot in the business world. Instead of defaulting to, I can't afford that, it's how can I afford this? How can I make this work? Right. And it's neuroscience. Your brain either says, oh, that's not physically possible, end of the road, right? Or, oh, wait, she's asking us a question, a problem to solve. Let me get into problem solving mode and figure out how to make this happen. And that's true in workouts, that's true in nutrition, true in the business world, true in all of
Yeah,
life. I love what you were saying about self-identity. One of my personal mantras is be as you wish to seem. And that is like on repeat in my brain because if you are being the way you want to be seen, right? Or you want to seem in the world, that means you have to take the actions that go along with that. And you said it so beautifully, Robyn. It's like if I lose the weight, then I'll be happy. If I lose the weight, then I'll start taking pictures with my family and opting back into activities. And it's like, well, first of all, life doesn't work like that because it's who you become on the journey. And secondly, if we start taking those actions now, you are going to be that person by default because you are
yeah.
living that life.
Well, and I think you'd asked me before, what is one of the biggest obstacles that I see? And I think one of the biggest obstacles that I see is people saying that they don't have the time.
Mm,
right? Oftentimes we will make the choice to, do something like becoming a member of Ignite, and you'll make these choices knowing, really coming from your higher version of yourself. It's really that part of you that wants change. And you do it, and then you have the reaction like I did, where it was like, "Oh my gosh, what in the heck did I just do?" Right? We jump into the fear-based brain, of all the worries and rumination of what could go wrong. And again, that's that part of us. If we give our brain the opportunity, if we're like, this isn't going to work, your brain is going to look for the evidence of how this is not going to work, right? And so it's really reframing the way that we are looking at things and speaking about things. But I think one of the biggest obstacles I find is, when I'm working with a member and they say, I don't have time for this. I don't have time to track my food. I don't have time to exercise. I don't have time, fill in the blank. And in all honesty, we don't have time not to. And I think when we look at the cost and the benefit of the choices that we make, we really start to recognize that. And sometimes it takes us looking at, what is the cost of this choice that I'm making right here and now in the short term, and what's the benefit? And then looking, what is the cost and the benefit of this 10 years from now or 20 years from now? And if you compare those two lists, that cost and that benefit list of the short-term discomfort, or, maybe sacrifices, because we all have 24 hours a day. We've got to sacrifice something if we want to change things. Um, but when we look at the difference between that short-term discomfort and that long-term success, usually those benefits will rule out. And then sometimes we can convince our brain, yes, maybe, tracking my food right now seems tedious or burdensome. And looking at the fact that, I may be on medications for the rest of my life, or, whatever, if I don't do this, all of a sudden those costs and benefits, there's going to be a definite weight on one versus the other. And when we compare those lists, it makes it much easier sometimes to lean into the temporary discomfort and the why, right? I think, when I look at macronutrient tracking, you'll get me on a whole nother passion project here. But what I love about macronutrient tracking is it gives us feedback. It's the only way to get a personalized program for your body, right? When we start getting the feedback from your body, then your coach can take that and they can work with that and they can truly customize your nutrition. But it takes that input. We've got to put the energy in and lean into doing the action that'll get us the data we need.
yeah. One of my favorite exercises, if you want to like really hold your own feet to the fire, is I will never use the words I don't have time for that. I will force myself to say out loud, this isn't important enough for me to prioritize. And
Mhm.
sometimes it's true. Sometimes I'll say that and I'll be like, yeah, that feels valid. Like it's not that I don't have time for it. It's not a must for me right now. It's not important enough for me to prioritize. Sometimes I say that and I'm like, ooh, there it is. Like maybe I need to look at my
Yeah,
schedule again. But that's what it is. You know, if someone gave you $1 million to show up at the gym, you'd get your butt to the gym. So it's not that you don't have time. It just doesn't feel like enough of a priority. And when we can get honest with ourselves about that, it doesn't mean you have to do the thing. The world's not going to end.
yeah.
But at least let's be honest about what it is or isn't.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that same thread takes us into pretty much anything we do. If
Yeah.
when we are actually very, very honest with ourselves, with why we are saying what we are saying, we show up differently, right? It's the same conversation when I'm talking with a woman and we're kind of debriefing, something that happened and looking at, why did this occur? What is it? What is the lesson we can extract from it? How do we come up with a strategy and move forward, right? I think the biggest question for me is, what was the intention going in? Because if I made a choice going in, then own it and enjoy it, right? If I make a choice, so I have a son and daughter-in-law that lived in Italy for 2 years, and they are foodies. They love their food and all the stuff. So if I ever get the opportunity to go to Italy, I am not going to be counting my macros to the T, you guys. It's not going to happen because I have tasted the food that these two make and it is absolutely delicious. So I would be going there with a conscious choice that I want to eat and enjoy the taste and the culture and choose those things, right? Um, and I know that I have goals for my body and how it feels after eating a meal. And so I think it's just really important the way that we enter into a situation, that we enter it in consciously choosing how we want to show up, and then we embrace it, right? If I am going to eat, a high fat or a high sugar dessert, I am 100% going to show up and enjoy every bite of it, right? Because I'm choosing to eat it, which is very different than going and eating it and then feeling shame, blame, guilt, beating myself up for it for the next day. And so I'm one of the things when I do talk with people is really how am I showing up for the choices I'm making and owning them? Because I can easily, and even if we make a mistake, right? If we have a slip up or if we choose something that we regret, again, we own it, we learn from it, and we move on. And I think those are really important to progress too, is just recognizing, yes, this is what I did, owning it, learn from it, move on. And that it helps us.
I want to make sure we save time for the Q&A, but there's one question that if there's anyone on this earth I want to answer this question, it's you. So I'm
Oh
going to
no.
ask this, and then we'll do our best to still save a decent amount of time for Q&A. You and I probably 12 times a day repeat the statement, our body's always talking to us, whether it's what we want to hear or not. Can you, being the data brain and being the educator that you are, can you explain what that statement, your body's always talking to you, whether it's what you want to hear or not, what does that statement mean to you?
I use the phrase a lot. You can plug one ear if you want to, but here's what your body is telling you, right? And I think and that kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier of letting go of the outcome.
Mhm.
Because I can, you know, spend all day planning and designing what I think my body should be doing. And I can give the input that I can to the very best of my ability, and my body may tell me something differently. And really, what that means to me is, specifically in macronutrient tracking, which is what many of us are doing because we want weight loss. Um, when we can collect great data, and to me, that's what macronutrient tracking is all about. It's getting data on what your body is doing and how it's responding to what you're doing, right? Um, so when you are doing that and you're collecting that data, what I love, and this is the data part of my brain and job that I adore, is I can take pretty much any woman or person that is sitting in front of me and they can give me their data and I could look at it and I can tell them what their body is telling them. And what I mean by that is when we start to gain weight, when we start seeing these patterns or trends, or when we start losing weight or whatever, if we are tracking some of those specific data points, we can really start getting an idea of what's going on. I very quickly can look at data and be like, my guess is there's probably some inflammation going on. Why don't you go back to your member and talk with them about this and let's dig into this a little bit, right? Or looking at the way the macros got changed. Oh my goodness, I bet that we're probably holding on some water weight because of some of those carbs that we increase. It's not fat, let's drink a little bit of water. The body's going to release that water weight. So I guess when I'm looking at that, what I'm saying and thinking is yes, your body is going to be responding to whatever you're doing, and it's going to show up in either a lack of energy or in hunger, or, um, we're going to be able to look at your sleep and we're going to be able to dial that in and see, if I have someone who's gaining weight, even though they are hitting their macros beautifully, we're going to be looking at what does your sleep look like, right? If I'm seeing that they're getting 4 hours of sleep a night, well, we absolutely know that cortisol is part of this equation, and we need to really dig into that before we really do much more with the macros and the nutrition, right? We can do some of it simultaneously, but now we know we've got some other things, right? Or if we're getting bloating or we're getting, some of these other things, we know we've got to dig into gut health. We've got to be looking at the gut biome and are there any optimizations that we can do there? So I don't know, without specifics, I can't jump in there, but our bodies it's always talking to us. I was one of those women, you guys, and again, this is where you plug one ear. But when I went through my first cycle, I went up to 2,000 calories. I did my homework. Again, being the data brain, I tracked everything. I stayed at maintenance for 4 weeks and then put myself into a cut. This part I was doing on my own. Put myself into a cut and I lost 0 pounds. It was incredibly depressing. It was frustrating. I beat myself up a whole lot. Like, yeah, who were you thinking you could do this, right? And then I found Rachel, and I was on my way back up when I met her, doing it all over again, seeing what it was that I had done wrong, and now I know what I know, and there were a whole lot of things that I had done wrong in that process. But my second time around, I took myself up. Well, Rachel helped me get up there to over 2,000, and I stayed there for 3 months. And after staying there for 3 months, I had over a 25-pound weight loss. So, there's a lot to be said for listening to the body because my body wasn't ready. It wasn't ready for the weight loss stage when I wanted it to be ready. And I did a little more healing and I did lose that weight that I needed. So, and I'm happy to say I can maintain it, right? Now I have the skills and know how to maintain, and now I'm at the weight that I want to be, and I'm eating 2,300 calories, not 1,200 calories, right? Um, and I could always go lose a little more if I wanted to, but I'm content where I am. So,
Yeah. And that's the beauty of a healing stage. I mean, the first time they are slow, they're tedious, no one wants to do them. And then you know how to keep your metabolism healthy for the rest of your life. You're in the driver's seat when our body does say something we don't want to hear instead of doing this, right? It's like, okay, that's annoying. I wish you weren't saying that. And I hear you. Let me flow with that
yeah,
tendency. And it just makes the whole thing faster.
yeah.
I love it. Oh, Robyn, you are the best. All right. I want to make sure we save the last 12-ish minutes. Um, any questions you have for Robyn? It could be, I mean, obviously she knows the specifics of macros inside and out. It could be about her own story. It could be about mindset work. Feel free, you can drop it in the chat box, or you can just go ahead and unmute and or use the little hand emoji if you really want to, but you don't have to use that. It's like the middle school thing where no one wants to ask the first question, and then once someone asks, the floodgates will be open.
I have a question.
Yeah, Shannon.
I'm very new. This is my first lunch and learn, so I have not gone through the macros training yet. But I'm really curious as you're talking about macros and how you can tell, what your body's saying to you. Like, how do you first like determine that once you've like tracked your macros for the 5 days? Like, what's the science behind figuring that out?
Sure. Now, what I love about that, Shannon, is the science is in the trends and the patterns that you start seeing. So often it does take more than a week or two, is because what we really want to be looking at is how is your body trending. So as you track the macros, and one thing that I didn't talk about earlier, I don't think, is the key absolutely to success with macronutrient tracking is developing consistency. What our brain is constantly looking for is safety. And by giving your body consistent nutrients, it allows it to start to be able to sense that safety. So often when we're eating, either high calorie and then low calorie and then high calorie, then low calorie, we have women who come in. I'm working with a woman right now who came in eating under 900 calories and she was gaining weight every single week. And she obviously was under eating, but every time her body would eat a little bit more than what it had already kind of become accustomed to, it would hold on to whatever nutrient she was giving it because it never knew when it was going to get that next meal. So, to answer your question, what we're going to be looking at, and your coach will be looking at, is over the period of time that you're tracking your macronutrients, what are patterns and trends that start coming, right? They're going to be looking at how easily are you hitting your carbs and your fat and your protein, and where does your body naturally fall? For fat, you'll see your coach will give you a range. There's kind of this lower range, zero point 0.3 grams per body weight, and then a higher range of 0.45 grams. Many women will fall beautifully in that 0.35 range, where you take 0.35 and multiply it by your body weight, and many, many women do well there. I am not one of those women. My body functions much more beautifully at the top range of my fat. At the top range of my fat, that's where my body regulated my hormones and I got rid of my hot flashes. That's
Wow.
where I started getting more absorption of vitamins and minerals and that. So that's what your coach is going to be looking at because your body, when we said your body will tell, one of the ways I often will see it when I'm working with someone is they're going to be coming back and they'll be like, oh my gosh, I cannot hit these carbs. And at the end of the day, I'm wanting so much more fat, right? And then we still have goals that we're going to work on to get your nutrition optimized. And within those goals, we can lean into what your body really needs and what it's asking for. Certain bodies need certain things. We know that every body needs a certain amount of carbs. It needs a certain amount of protein and it needs a certain amount of fat in order to be optimized. One of the things that we see a lot is women coming in and their fat will be so far below their ranges that we can know and most people coming in are pretty educated about what food do I eat, what's the good foods if you want to assign a morality to food. We have a pretty good idea. Let's eat some fruits, let's eat some vegetables, let's eat some complex carbs. But if you come in eating under that fat range, you can be eating those all day, every day, and you're probably urinating out the majority of the vitamins and minerals because you don't have enough fat in your bloodstream to absorb it, right? And so when we're asking about how will I know what my body's communicating, it's going to be in those symptoms and the feedback that you're reporting on those check-ins. What we're looking at are all of those different targeted things. We're going to be asking about your fiber. We're going to be asking about your water intake. We're going to be asking about your sleep. What did your stress look like this week? And so as you're giving those feedbacks, then what we're looking at is, okay, now what did your weight do this week? Okay. If your weight, depending on where you're at in the weight loss cycle, and your coach will talk to you about that. But if your weight, let's say you're working yourself up to maintenance, if you gained weight that week, but you ate to your macros, we know without a doubt that the 50 calories that we gave you did not cause weight gain. So now what your coach is doing is they're looking at the feedback and they're going to say, what is your body telling you? And then they're going to look at it and maybe they find out that your hydration wasn't quite where it needed to be, or maybe the sleep wasn't there. And so what it does is it gives us a target of, okay, now we're going to lean in and we're going to experiment, right? Let's increase your hydration this week and let's see what happens next week, right? Oftentimes what would happen in that example is they'd come back and the weight would have fallen right back off because it was water weight, right? As soon as you drink more water, it allows your body to release the water weight it was holding on and it can release
Huh.
that weight. So lots of cool things, but your coach will kind
Yeah.
of walk you through that and they'll help teach you. So as they see the feedback, they're going to hold up the mirror to you and reflect it back to you so that you can learn it for yourself.
Oh, thank you. That's great. It's actually more involved than I realized. The
Well, and
science
we don't
behind it.
Yeah, and we don't always, I will be 100% transparent. We can't always to a T say, yes, it's absolutely this, but that's what we can do. We can make our best guess based on the feedback that we do have, and then we lean into it and we get curious and we practice something for this week, and then we take the feedback from the body and then keep moving on. And it's really interesting. Our bodies have very specific patterns and trends that can start coming out over the weeks as we're tracking it and your coach will be able to help reflect that back to you.
Great. Thanks, Robyn.
All right, we've got two more questions in the chat box and about I'm going to say 4 minutes left because I have a quick announcement before we go. Um, from Sandra, Robyn, how did you start planning your meals? Did you focus on doing one pivotal thing consistently and then add to it? I find designing 3 meals a day time consuming and overwhelming, and I don't end up doing it. I want to say one quick thing before you answer. Sandra, I do not plan my meals. I hate, like, pre-planning to me is the bane of my existence. I am someone like I do not like rules. I don't like authority. I don't want people telling me what to do, even if it's my past self. So pre-planning to me feels like someone nagging me of what to eat the next day, even though it's me. So just to be clear, it's not something you have to do. Um,
Yeah.
and if you are going to do it, Robyn could speak to how to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and I think when I said pre-planning, I was looking more at pre-tracking. And again, I know Rachel and I are very different in this way. And that's fine. I think that's really great to understand that there is no one way to do this. To answer your question, I actually think oftentimes we jump into things like this and we want a transformation immediately, and I think that's the wrong approach. Honestly, I think the very best thing when we're first tracking is to take the foods that you are already eating and just learn to increase certain amounts of things that you are lacking and decrease certain amounts of what you're lacking. And so partial portions for me is the best way to do that. Looking at what is it in my what I'm already eating that I could maybe just decrease a little bit to decrease that fat or to increase that protein or vice versa. So I think that is my first recommendation, is start there with what you're already eating and doing partial portions. Um, the second thing that I love to do, I have a very, very busy schedule during the, as many people do, right? And so for me, I actually will cook up two types of protein on the weekend. I do it every single Saturday. I stick on my favorite music and I listen to it while I'm just doing a little bit of pre-cooking. For me, it's two types of protein, cook it up in batch, stick it in my food or freezer, and I pull from that however I need. So I don't necessarily come up with specific meals for every day, but I know that I can take those two proteins and I can make them into sandwiches. I can make them into wraps. I can make them into a salad. You know, I can throw them into a fancier dinner if I need to, but I always have, for me, protein was always the thing that was hanging me up a little bit. The other thing I do, I have a smoothie that is, I call it my equalizer. It's what I use for after my workouts every day. And in my smoothie, because I wasn't naturally a vegetable eater in the beginning. I actually am one of those people that put weird things in my smoothie. I have cucumber and sweet peppers and spinach in my smoothie, and then I put fresh berries. But it's my equalizer. If I'm going to have a higher fat dinner, then I don't put my chia seeds and my flaxseed in. If I'm going to have a lower fat dinner, I might add a little extra of those. It's kind of my equalizer for the day. I plan out my dinner and then I typically have very similar breakfasts and lunches. And so I use my smoothie as my equalizer. If I need a little extra protein, I'll throw a little extra protein powder in it. If I need a little bit less, I'll take a little out. So I like having one meal of the day that's kind of an equalizer that you can take from or add to very easily.
I love that term equalizer. And protein is the one that most people struggle with. So starting that with that as the base is a great idea. Robyn, we cannot thank you enough. I love your brain. I could listen to you teach all day, every day. You're teaching stuff I've been doing for a decade, and I still learn every time I hear you talk, because your use of analogies and examples and just that mix of heart and data is a beautiful thing to witness. So thank you.